Latino family kicked out of restaurant for talking loudly. Viral video exposes racism and transforms business. Hello? Welcome, leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy this story. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. A family, joyful and united, sat down at a local restaurant, unaware that in just a few minutes their world would be turned upside down. Laughter echoed at the table, and the youngest child's birthday was about to be toasted. But before the cake could even be cut, a shadow of tension started to spread through the air, unnoticed by everyone. Except them. Then, without warning, the family found themselves at the center of a scene they never imagined. The eyes of strangers burned into them. Words were said, accusations flew, and within moments, what started as a festive evening turned into a nightmare that would change their lives forever. But the real story was only just beginning. When the camera started rolling, no one realized that a single moment of injustice would ignite a storm that could tear apart a community and rebuild it in the same breath. What happened next would leave everyone questioning. How could this happen in plain sight? And more importantly, how far would one family have to go to fight for their dignity and reclaim their voice? The bustling streets of downtown Los Angeles were alive with the typical Saturday night energy. Neon signs flickered, casting a warm glow on the faces of passers-by, while the distant hum of traffic provided a familiar urban soundtrack. Amidst this lively scene, the Gonzalez family made their way towards La Rosa Blanca, a popular Mexican-American fusion restaurant known for its vibrant atmosphere and authentic flavors. Carmen Gonzalez, a petite woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, held the hand of her youngest son, Miguel, who was practically bouncing with excitement. Today was his 8th birthday, and after months of saving, the family had finally managed to gather everyone for a special celebration at the restaurant Miguel had been dreaming about. "Mama, will they have the big sombrero? The one they put on your head and sing?" Miguel asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. Carmen laughed, ruffling his hair. "I'm sure they will, mijo. It's your special day after all." Jose, Carmen's husband, walked a few steps behind, his weathered hands in his pockets and a proud smile on his face. Their 2 older children, Sofia, 14, and Diego, 12, were engrossed in conversation, playfully nudging each other as they walked. As they entered the restaurant, the aroma of sizzling fajitas and freshly made tortillas enveloped them. The hostess, a young woman with a polite smile, led them to a booth near the center of the dining room. The Gonzalez family settled in, their excitement palpable as they perused the colorful menus. "Papa, can I get the quesadilla burger?" Diego asked, his eyes lighting up at the fusion creation. Jose nodded. "Of course, it's a celebration. Order whatever you'd like." The family's chatter blended with the ambient noise of the restaurant. The clinking of glasses, the sizzle from the kitchen, and the murmur of other diners' conversations. They were lost in their own world of joy and anticipation, savoring this rare moment when work schedules and school commitments aligned to allow for a family outing. As they waited for their food, Carmen regaled the children with stories from her childhood in Mexico, her animated gestures and occasional bursts of laughter drawing smiles from nearby tables. Jose chimed in with his own anecdotes, and soon the whole family was engaged in lively conversation, their voices rising and falling with the ebb and flow of their stories. It was in this moment of familial bliss that the first tremors of the impending earthquake struck. A tall, thin waiter with a pinched expression approached their table, his demeanor a stark contrast to the warmth emanating from the Gonzalez family. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying a barely concealed edge. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep your voices down. You're disturbing the other patrons." The laughter at the table died instantly. Carmen's smile faded, replaced by a look of confusion and embarrassment. Jose straightened in his seat, his brow furrowing. "I'm sorry," Jose said, his accent thickening with nervousness. "We didn't realize we were being loud. We'll try to keep it down." The waiter's lip curled slightly. "See that you do. This is a respectable establishment, not a carnival." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Miguel, not fully understanding the situation, looked up at his mother with wide, questioning eyes. "Mama, did we do something wrong?" Carmen swallowed hard, fighting back the sting of tears. "No, mijo, we're just going to be a little quieter now, okay?" The family tried to resume their celebration, but the joy had been sucked out of the air. Their voices were hushed now, their laughter muted. Other diners glanced their way, some with sympathy, others with barely disguised disdain. Unbeknownst to the Gonzalez family, a young woman at a nearby table had witnessed the entire exchange. Her hand trembled slightly as she discreetly pulled out her phone and began to record. As the family picked at their food, the waiter returned, this time with the manager in tow. The manager, a stocky man with a receding hairline, didn't even attempt to smile. "I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to leave," he said, his voice cold and firm. "We've received multiple complaints about the noise level from your table." Jose stood up, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Multiple complaints? We've been quiet since your waiter spoke to us. This is my son's birthday dinner." The manager's expression hardened. "Sir, please don't make a scene. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. Now, I'm going to have to insist that you leave." Carmen grabbed Jose's arm, her eyes pleading. "Jose, por favor, let's just go, don't make it worse." The children sat frozen, confusion and fear etched on their young faces. Miguel's lower lip trembled as he looked at the uneaten cake in front of him, the candle still unlit. As the Gonzalez family gathered their things, the whispers from other tables grew louder. Some patrons averted their eyes while others stared openly, their gazes a mix of curiosity and judgment. The walk to the exit felt like an eternity. Carmen held Miguel close while Sofia and Diego trailed behind, their heads bowed in shame. Jose walked stiffly, his jaw clenched, fighting back the urge to turn around and confront the injustice. As they stepped out into the cool night air, the door of La Rosa Blanca closing behind them with a final damning thud, the family stood in shocked silence. The bustling street continued its Saturday night rhythm, oblivious to the devastation that had just occurred. Miguel broke the silence, his small voice quivering. "I'm sorry, Papa, I didn't mean to ruin my birthday." At those words, Carmen burst into tears, pulling Miguel into a tight embrace. Jose knelt down, enveloping both of them in his arms. "You didn't ruin anything, mijo," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are a family, we are together, that's what matters." As they held each other on the sidewalk, passers-by giving them a wide berth, none of them could have imagined that this moment of humiliation and pain would soon ignite a firestorm. The video, capturing their unjust expulsion, was already making its way onto social media platforms, about to spark a nationwide conversation about racism, cultural sensitivity, and the power of viral media to effect change. For the Gonzalez family, this night marked the end of their innocence, but it was also the beginning of a journey that would challenge them, unite them, and ultimately transform not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. As they walked away from La Rosa Blanca, they carried with them the weight of injustice, unaware that they were about to become the unwitting catalyst for a movement much larger than themselves. The Gonzalez family's Sunday morning began like any other, with no inkling of the storm brewing beyond their modest apartment walls. Carmen was in the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the sizzle of huevos rancheros. Jose sat at the small dining table, absently scrolling through his phone while the kids lounged in the living room still in their pajamas. Sophia's phone pinged with a notification, then another, and another.
"Mama, Papa," she called out, her voice trembling. "You need to see this."
The family huddled around Sophia's phone, watching in disbelief as the video from last night's disastrous dinner played out on the small screen. The footage, shaky but clear, captured their humiliation in high definition. The waiter's sneer, the manager's cold dismissal, and their own dejected exit from La Rosa Blanca. "Dios mío," Carmen whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Who filmed this?" Jose's face darkened as he read the comments flooding in beneath the video. Some expressed outrage and solidarity. "This is disgusting. Boycott La Rosa Blanca. My heart breaks for this family. This is not okay." Others were less sympathetic. They were probably being way louder than the video shows. Restaurant was right. "Stop playing the race card, follow the rules, or get out." Miguel tugged at Carmen's sleeve, his eyes wide with confusion. "Mama, why are all these people talking about us?" Before Carmen could answer, Diego's phone started ringing. It was his best friend, Jack. "Dude, you're all over Twitter. Are you okay?" The breakfast lay forgotten as reality sank in. Their private family moment had become public spectacle, dissected and debated by thousands of strangers online. At school the next day, Sophia felt every eye on her as she walked down the hallway. Whispers followed in her wake. "That's her. From the video. I heard they were screaming and throwing food. My dad says they should go back to where they came from." Sophia's cheeks burned as she quickened her pace, keeping her head down. In class, a crumpled note landed on her desk. She unfolded it with trembling hands. "Go back to Mexico, you loud." Tears stung her eyes as she excused herself to the bathroom, where she spent the rest of the period trying to muffle her sobs. Meanwhile, Jose was at work, laying tile in an upscale home renovation. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. His foreman, Mike, approached with a concerned look. "Hey Jose, you doing okay? I saw that video." Jose's grip tightened on his trowel. "I'm fine," he said curtly, not meeting Mike's eyes. "Look, if you need some time off." "I said I'm fine," Jose snapped, immediately regretting his outburst. "Lo siento, can we not talk about it?" Mike nodded, backing away slowly. "Sure thing, buddy, just let me know if you need anything." As Jose returned to his work, he could feel the stares of his coworkers burning into his back. The sanctuary of his job, where he'd always felt respected for his skill and work ethic, now felt tainted. At home that evening, Carmen was cooking dinner when a breaking news alert flashed across the small TV in the kitchen. Her heart sank as she saw the familiar facade of La Rosa Blanca on the screen. In local news, popular restaurant La Rosa Blanca is facing backlash after a viral video showed staff ejecting a Latino family for allegedly being too loud. Carmen's hand shook as she turned up the volume. The report cut to an interview with James Whitaker, the owner of La Rosa Blanca. "We stand by our staff's decision," Whitaker said, his face a mask of corporate neutrality. "La Rosa Blanca has a responsibility to ensure a pleasant dining experience for all our patrons. We do not discriminate based on race or ethnicity, but we do have standards of behavior that apply to everyone." Carmen felt a surge of anger. "Standards of behavior?" she muttered. "We were celebrating our son's birthday." Just then, Jose walked in, his clothes still dusty from work. He froze when he saw the TV screen. "Turn it off," he said quietly. "But Jose..." "I said turn it off," he snapped, his voice rising. The kids who had been setting the table stopped and stared. Carmen switched off the TV, the sudden silence deafening. Jose slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. I can't bear to see it anymore, to hear them lie about us like that." Carmen knelt beside him, taking his calloused hands in hers. "Mi amor, we can't hide from this. Maybe we should speak out? Tell our side of the story?" Jose looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. "And risk making it worse? Risk losing everything we've worked for?" Before Carmen could respond, Sophia's voice cut through the tension. Guys, you might want to see this." She held out her phone, open to a local news website. The headline made their hearts skip a beat. "Civil rights lawyer offers to represent family in viral restaurant video." The Gonzalez family huddled around the small screen, their dinner growing cold on the table. As they read the article, a mix of hope and apprehension filled the room. Could this be their chance for justice? Or would it only lead to more pain and exposure? The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air as they looked at each other, searching for answers in each other's eyes. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would test their family bonds, challenge their values, and ultimately spark a movement that would reach far beyond the walls of La Rosa Blanca. As the sun set over Los Angeles, casting long shadows across their small apartment, the Gonzalez family stood at a crossroads. The choice they would make in the coming days would not only shape their own lives, but would ripple out to touch countless others in ways they could never have imagined. The Gonzalez family's world had been turned upside down in a matter of days. What started as a private moment of humiliation had morphed into a national conversation about racism and discrimination. As the video continued to spread like wildfire across social media platforms, the family found themselves thrust into an unwanted spotlight. Carmen's phone rang incessantly. Local news stations, national talk shows, and even a few documentary filmmakers were all clamoring for interviews. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the growing list of missed calls and unread messages, feeling overwhelmed and out of her depth. Jose, she called out, her voice tinged with anxiety. What are we going to do? Everyone wants to talk to us. Jose, who had always been the family's quiet pillar of strength, now looked lost. He paced the small living room, running his hands through his hair. I don't know, mi amor. I just don't know. Their conversation was interrupted by a piercing scream from Sophia's room. They rushed in to find their daughter sobbing uncontrollably, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Mija, what's wrong? Carmen asked, pulling Sophia into a tight embrace. Between sobs, Sophia managed to choke out, They're saying terrible things about us online. They're calling us. She couldn't finish the sentence, dissolving into tears again. Jose gently took the phone from Sophia's hand and scrolled through the comments. His face hardened as he read the vile, racist remarks directed at his family. Threats of violence mixed with crude stereotypes and calls for deportation. He felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by a wave of fear. How could he protect his family from this invisible threat? As if on cue, a rock crashed through the living room window, shattering glass across the floor. Attached was a note with a chilling message. Go back to where you came from. The family huddled together in terrified silence, the sound of their racing hearts seeming to echo off the walls. Miguel clung to Carmen, his small body shaking. Diego stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. This was no longer just about a viral video or online comments. The hatred had literally crashed into their home. Jose sprang into action, quickly checking that everyone was unharmed before calling the police. As they waited for the officers to arrive, he began boarding up the broken window, his movements mechanical, his mind racing. We can't stay here, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. It's not safe anymore. Carmen nodded slowly, the reality of their situation sinking in. But where can we go, Jose? This is our home. Before Jose could respond, there was a knock at the door. Everyone tensed, fear etched on their faces. Jose approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. To his surprise, he saw a well-dressed man in his 50s holding a briefcase. Who is it? Carmen whispered. Jose opened the door slightly, chain still in place. Can I help you? The man smiled warmly. Mr. Gonzalez, I'm Robert Martinez, the civil rights lawyer who reached out about your case. I'm sorry for coming unannounced, but I saw the police car outside and wanted to make sure everything was all right. Jose hesitated for a moment before letting him in. As Robert entered, he took in the scene. The boarded-up window, the frightened family huddled together, the palpable tension in the air. I see I've arrived at a difficult moment, he said softly. Perhaps we should discuss your options. Over the next hour, as the police came and went, Robert laid out a plan. He spoke of legal action against the restaurant, of using their story to push for broader change, of the potential to turn this nightmare into something positive. But I won't lie to you, he said, his tone serious. If we go down this road, things will get harder before they get better. You'll be in the public eye even more. There will be supporters, but also more detractors. It won't be easy. The family exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Carmen spoke first, her voice quiet but firm. We didn't ask for this fight, but if fighting is the only way to make sure this doesn't happen to another family, then maybe we have to. Jose nodded slowly, squeezing Carmen's hand. We've always taught our children to stand up for what's right. How can we do any less? Sofia and Diego voiced their agreement, but Miguel remained silent, his young face creased with worry. Mijo? Carmen prompted gently. What do you think? Miguel looked up, his eyes brimming with tears. I'm scared, Mama, but I don't want any other kids to feel like I did that night. Like we did something wrong just by being us. Robert smiled, genuinely moved by the family's courage. Then we have work to do. But remember, you're not alone in this fight. There are many people out there who want to support you. As if to underscore his point, Carmen's phone pinged with a new message. It was from their neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, an elderly widow they'd barely spoken to before. Saw what happened on the news. So sorry you're going through this. If you need anything, groceries, a safe place to stay, or just someone to talk to, I'm here. You're not alone. Carmen read the message aloud, her voice cracking with emotion. For the first time in days, a glimmer of hope shone through the darkness that had enveloped them. As Robert began outlining their next steps, the Gonzalez family drew strength from each other. They were embarking on a journey they never wanted, facing challenges they never imagined. But they were doing it together, and they were not alone. Outside, as the sun began to set, a small group of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk. Some held candles, others signs of support. A silent vigil for a family under siege, a quiet statement that hate would not win here. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. But in that moment, surrounded by the love of their family and the unexpected support of their community, the Gonzalez family found the courage to take the first step towards justice. Little did they know, their fight was about to shine a light on issues far bigger than one family or one restaurant, sparking a movement that would ripple across the nation. As the Gonzalez family adjusted to their new reality under the spotlight, their attorney, Robert Martinez, worked tirelessly to build their case. It was during one of his late-night review sessions of the viral video that he noticed something peculiar. "Wait a minute," Robert muttered to himself, leaning closer to his computer screen. He rewound the video, watching it again with intense focus. There, in the background, barely visible but unmistakable, was a face he recognized. The next morning, Robert called an urgent meeting with the Gonzalez family. They gathered in their living room, tension palpable in the air. "I've discovered something that changes everything," Robert began, his voice grave. He pulled out his tablet and showed them a freeze frame from the video. "Do you see this man in the corner?" The family leaned in, squinting at the image. Jose shook his head. "I don't recognize him. Should we?" Robert took a deep breath. "That man is Thomas Whitaker, the brother of James Whitaker, the owner of La Rosa Blanca." A collective gasp filled the room. Carmen's hand flew to her mouth. "But what does this mean?" "It means," Robert said, his eyes gleaming with the excitement of a major breakthrough, "that this might not have been a simple misunderstanding or an isolated incident. Thomas Whitaker has a history of involvement in discriminatory practices at other businesses. His presence that night raises serious questions about whether this was part of a larger pattern of discrimination. The implications of this revelation hit the family like a tidal wave. What they had experienced wasn't just a random act of prejudice, but potentially part of a systemic issue deeply rooted in the restaurant's operations. Jose, who had been quiet throughout the explanation, suddenly stood up, his fists clenched. "So they set us up? They were looking for an excuse to kick us out from the moment we walked in?" Robert held up a hand, cautioning, "We can't jump to conclusions yet, but this certainly adds a new dimension to our case. It suggests that the restaurant's actions might have been premeditated rather than a heat-of-the-moment decision." As the family processed this information, their phones began buzzing simultaneously. News alerts popped up on their screens. La Rosa Blanca, feeling the pressure of the ongoing controversy, had issued a public statement. Carmen read it aloud, her voice trembling. "La Rosa Blanca deeply regrets the unfortunate incident involving the Gonzalez family. We would like to extend our sincerest apologies and invite the family back for a complimentary meal. We are committed to serving all members of our diverse community and will be implementing sensitivity training for our staff." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into a cacophony of voices. "They think a free meal will fix this?" Diego scoffed. "It's too late for apologies," Sophia added, her voice bitter. Jose remained quiet, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Finally he spoke, his voice low but firm. "No, we can't accept this. It's not enough." Carmen looked at her husband, surprised. Jose had always been the peacemaker, the one to avoid confrontation. But now she saw a fire in his eyes that she'd never seen before. "Jose?" she questioned softly. He turned to Robert. "What's our next move? How do we fight this?" Robert nodded, understanding the weight of Jose's decision. "We push forward with the lawsuit. This apology, coming only after the video went viral, doesn't address the systemic issues at play. And with this new information about Thomas Whitaker's presence, we have even more grounds to investigate deeper." As Robert outlined their legal strategy, Carmen's phone pinged again. It was a message from an unknown number. "I used to work at La Rosa Blanca. What happened to your family wasn't the first time. There are others who want to come forward. Can we talk?" Carmen's hands shook as she showed the message to Robert. The attorney's eyes widened. "This could be the key to blowing this case wide open," he said. The atmosphere in the room shifted. What had started as a personal fight for justice was rapidly evolving into something much larger. The Gonzalez family found themselves at the center of a potentially groundbreaking case that could expose years of discriminatory practices and bring about real change. But with this new development came new fears. The stakes were higher now, and the backlash could be even more severe. The family exchanged glances, a mix of determination and apprehension in their eyes. "Are we ready for this?" Carmen asked, looking at each family member in turn. Miguel, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, spoke up. "We have to be, Mama, for all the other families who didn't have a video camera on them when it happened." Jose put his arm around his young son, pride swelling in his chest. "Miguel's right. We didn't choose this fight, but now that we're in it, we have to see it through." As the family steeled themselves for the battle ahead, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something monumental. Their personal tragedy was transforming into a catalyst for change, a chance to challenge deeply ingrained prejudices and fight for a more equitable society. Outside, the media frenzy continued to grow. News vans lined their street, reporters clamoring for a statement. But inside their modest home, the Gonzalez family stood united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They knew the road would be difficult, but they also knew they were no longer fighting just for themselves, but for countless others who had suffered in silence. As night fell, Robert left with a promise to begin depositions the next day. The family, exhausted but resolute, prepared for bed. But sleep would not come easily. Each of them lay awake, minds racing with the possibilities and perils that tomorrow might bring. They were on the cusp of a journey that would test their strength, challenge their values, and potentially change the course of their lives forever. Little did they know, the biggest revelations were yet to come, and the true depth of the discrimination they were about to uncover would shake not just La Rosa Blanca, but the entire community to its core. The days that followed the revelation about Thomas Whitaker's presence at La Rosa Blanca were a whirlwind of activity and emotion for the Gonzalez family. Their modest home had become the epicenter of a growing movement, with Robert Martinez orchestrating their legal strategy from their living room turned makeshift war room. As promised, Robert began depositions, starting with former employees of La Rosa Blanca who had come forward after seeing the viral video. Each testimony painted a more damning picture of the restaurant's practices, revealing a pattern of discrimination that stretched back years. Carmen sat in on many of these sessions, her heart breaking with each new story. "I had no idea it was this bad," she whispered to Jose one night, her eyes brimming with tears. "How many families have suffered in silence?" Jose nodded solemnly, the weight of their responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. But as the case grew, so did the divide within the family. Carmen, inspired by the courage of those coming forward, felt a growing need to speak out. "We need to tell our story," she insisted during a family meeting. "People need to hear the truth from us." Jose, however, was becoming increasingly wary of the attention. "Haven't we been exposed enough?" he argued, his voice strained. "Every time we step outside, there are cameras. The kids can't even go to school without being harassed." Sofia and Diego, caught in the middle, watched their parents' disagreement with growing unease. The unity that had initially fortified them in the face of adversity was starting to crack under the pressure. The tension came to a head when a prominent documentary filmmaker reached out, wanting to tell the Gonzalez family's story. Carmen saw it as an opportunity to amplify their message, while Jose viewed it as an invasion of the little privacy they had left. "Enough is enough," Jose shouted, his usual calm demeanor shattered. "We're not some circus act for people to gawk at." Carmen recoiled, hurt by his outburst. "This isn't about us anymore, Jose. Can't you see that? We have a chance to make real change." As their argument escalated, Miguel slipped out of the house unnoticed, overwhelmed by the conflict. It wasn't until hours later, when the police brought him home, that the family realized how deeply the stress was affecting them all. Meanwhile, La Rosa Blanca was facing its own crisis. The restaurant, once a local hotspot, now stood nearly empty most nights. Protests had become a regular occurrence outside its doors, and online review sites were flooded with negative comments. James Whitaker, the owner, was growing desperate. He reached out to Robert, practically begging for a meeting with the Gonzalez family. "Please," his message read, "I'll do anything to make this right." Robert brought the offer to the family, presenting them with a difficult choice. "We can settle this privately," he explained, "potentially with a significant financial compensation. Or we can continue with the lawsuit, which could lead to broader changes but will mean more public scrutiny." The family was torn. The promise of financial security was tempting, especially given the toll the case was taking on their lives. Jose, in particular, was drawn to the idea of putting this all behind them and returning to normalcy. But Carmen couldn't shake the feeling that they owed it to all those who had suffered similar discrimination to see this through. "If we settle now," she argued, "what message does that send to everyone who's been supporting us, to all those who've come forward with their own stories?" As the family grappled with this decision, the outside world continued to close in. Jose faced increasing tension at work, with some co-workers distancing themselves, afraid of being associated with the controversy. Sofia and Diego reported that some of their friends had stopped talking to them, their parents uncomfortable with the attention the Gonzalez name now attracted. The emotional toll was evident on everyone's faces. Carmen, once buoyant with the drive for justice, now looked worn and uncertain. Jose's usual steady presence had given way to a man on edge, jumping at every ring of the phone or knock at the door. One evening, as the family sat in tense silence over dinner, Miguel suddenly spoke up. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked, his young voice quivering with worry. The simple question cut through the tension like a knife. Carmen and Jose exchanged a look, suddenly aware of how their conflict was affecting their children. "Come here, mijo," Jose said softly, opening his arms. As Miguel climbed into his lap, the rest of the family drew closer, forming a tight circle. "We're going to be okay," Carmen assured, her voice strong despite the tears in her eyes. "No matter what happens, we have each other. That's what matters most." In that moment of reconnection, the family found a renewed sense of purpose. They realized that whatever decision they made, they needed to make it together, as a united front. As they huddled together, finding comfort in each other's presence, they were unaware that the biggest challenge was yet to come. The next day would bring a revelation that would not only change the course of their case but would shake the very foundations of their community. Outside, the sun was setting on another tumultuous day, casting long shadows across their neighborhood. But within the walls of their home, the Gonzalez family had found a moment of peace, a calm before the storm that was about to break. The Gonzalez family woke to an unseasonably cool Los Angeles morning, the marine layer hanging low over the city. It was as if the weather itself was reflecting the somber mood that had settled over their home in recent weeks. Little did they know, this day would bring a revelation that would change everything. As Carmen was preparing breakfast, a sharp knock at the door startled the family. Jose approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. His eyes widened in surprise. "It's James Whitaker," he whispered to Carmen, who had come to stand beside him. "The owner of La Rosa Blanca." The family exchanged bewildered looks. What could he possibly want showing up unannounced at their home? With a deep breath, Jose opened the door. James Whitaker stood there looking nothing like the confident restaurateur they remembered from TV interviews. His face was haggard, eyes rimmed with dark circles, his usually impeccable suit wrinkled and disheveled. "Mr. Gonzalez," he said, his voice hoarse, "I know I'm the last person you want to see, but please, I need to talk to you and your family. It's important." After a moment's hesitation, Jose nodded and stepped aside, allowing James to enter. The family gathered in the living room, tension palpable in the air. James stood awkwardly, wringing his hands. I owe you all an explanation and an apology. A real one this time." He took a deep breath, seeming to gather his courage. "What happened to your family that night? It wasn't just about noise. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate and it was wrong." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on James as he continued. "My family, we came to this country as immigrants too, 3 generations ago. We faced discrimination, hatred. It was brutal. My grandfather changed our last name from Blanco to Whitaker, hoping it would make life easier for us. James's voice cracked as he spoke. I thought if I distanced myself from my heritage, if I catered to a certain clientele, I could protect myself from ever feeling that pain again. But in doing so, I became the very thing that hurt my family all those years ago. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and shocking. The Gonzalez family sat in stunned silence, trying to process this unexpected turn of events. Carmen was the first to find her voice. But why? Why tell us this now? James looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and desperation. Because I can't live with myself anymore. What we did to you, what we've been doing for years, it's eating me alive. And your courage, your fight for justice, it's forced me to confront the monster I've become. He turned to Jose. I know an apology isn't enough. Nothing can undo what we did. But I'm here to offer more than words. I want to make this right, not just for your family, but for everyone we've hurt over the years. James laid out a proposal. He wanted to transform La Rosa Blanca. Not just sensitivity training, but a complete overhaul. He proposed turning the restaurant into a celebration of diversity, a place that would actively work to combat discrimination and promote understanding between cultures. I want to use my privilege, my platform, to make real change, he said. But I need your help, your story, your experience. It could be the catalyst for transformation, not just in my restaurant, but in our entire community. The Gonzalez family sat in shocked silence, trying to process this unexpected turn of events. Jose's face was a mask of conflicting emotions, anger at the confirmation of their mistreatment, confusion at this sudden change of heart, and a glimmer of something that looked almost like hope. Carmen, always the more empathetic of the two, leaned forward. Mr. Whitaker, I appreciate your honesty, but you must understand how difficult this is for us to hear. Your actions, your restaurant's policies, they've caused real pain, not just to us, but to countless others. James nodded, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his guilt. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, but I can't do it alone. Your family's story has the power to change hearts and minds. Together, we could turn this tragedy into a force for good. The proposal hung in the air, fraught with possibility and peril. On one hand, it offered a chance for real systemic change. On the other, it meant further exposure, more public scrutiny, and the challenge of working alongside the very person who had caused them so much pain. Sophia, who had been quiet throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. How do we know we can trust you? How do we know this isn't just damage control? James turned to her, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. You don't. I can only ask for a chance to prove myself through actions, not words. I'm prepared to sign legally binding agreements, to put my money and my reputation on the line. But more than that, I'm asking for an opportunity to redeem not just myself, but the legacy of my family, to honor the struggles of my grandfather, and to be someone he could be proud of. The room fell silent once more, the weight of the decision palpable. The Gonzalez family exchanged looks, a mix of uncertainty, hope, and apprehension passing between them. Jose cleared his throat. We need time to think about this, to discuss it as a family. James nodded, standing up. Of course, take all the time you need. And regardless of your decision, I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for what you've been through. As James left, the Gonzalez family remained in the living room, the air thick with unspoken thoughts and emotions. They had entered this fight seeking justice for themselves, but now they faced a decision that could impact countless lives. Could they find it in their hearts to work alongside the man who had caused them so much pain? Could they trust his sincerity? And were they ready to take on the responsibility of being the face of such a significant change? As the marine layer outside began to lift, sunlight streaming through the windows, the Gonzalez family faced their greatest challenge yet. Their decision would not only shape their own future, but had the potential to transform their community and beyond. Little did they know, their choice would set in motion a chain of events that would reverberate far beyond the walls of La Rosa Blanca, challenging deeply held beliefs and sparking a movement that would touch lives across the nation. The studio lights were blinding as the Gonzalez family took their seats on the stage of America Tonight. one of the country's most watched primetime news shows. Across from them sat James Whittaker, looking both nervous and determined. The air crackled with tension as millions of viewers tuned in, eager to witness the confrontation they'd been anticipating for weeks. Host Samantha Brooks' voice cut through the silence. "Good evening, America. Tonight we bring you an exclusive, the first face-to-face meeting between the Gonzalez family and James Whittaker, owner of La Rosa Blanca restaurant, since the viral video that sparked a national conversation on racism and discrimination." Carmen squeezed Jose's hand, her heart pounding. They had agonized over this decision, spending sleepless nights weighing the pros and cons. In the end, they had chosen to accept James's offer, not out of forgiveness, but out of a hope that their story could catalyze real change. Samantha turned to the Gonzalez family. "Carmen, Jose, can you take us back to that night at La Rosa Blanca? How did it feel to be asked to leave the restaurant?" Jose cleared his throat, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It felt humiliating, like we were less than human. We were just a family celebrating our son's birthday, and suddenly we were treated like criminals," Carmen added, her eyes glistening. "We've faced discrimination before, but never so blatantly. It broke my heart to see the confusion and fear in my children's eyes." The camera panned to James, who visibly flinched at their words. Samantha pressed on. "Mr. Whittaker, you've admitted that what happened that night wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern. Can you explain?" James took a deep breath, his face a mask of shame and regret. "What I'm about to say will shock many people, and it should. La Rosa Blanca has had an unofficial policy of discrimination for years. We've systematically discouraged certain groups from dining at our restaurant, including Latinos, African Americans, and other minorities." A collective gasp could be heard from the studio audience. Samantha leaned forward, her expression a mix of disbelief and journalistic hunger. "Are you saying you intentionally discriminated against customers based on their race?" "Yes," James replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "And it goes deeper than that. We've manipulated wait times, seated people in less desirable locations, even sabotaged orders, all to discourage certain groups from returning." The studio erupted in murmurs of shock and outrage. Jose's fists clenched, his face a storm of emotions. Carmen placed a calming hand on his arm, though her own eyes flashed with anger. Samantha turned back to the Gonzalez family. "How does it feel to hear this confession?" Jose spoke, his voice tight with controlled fury. "It's infuriating. It confirms our worst fears that what happened to us wasn't just a misunderstanding but a deliberate act of racism," Carmen added. "But it also validates the experiences of so many others who face similar discrimination. It's a painful truth, but one that needs to be exposed if we're ever going to address systemic racism in our society." The interview continued, delving into the personal stories of the Gonzalez family, the impact of the viral video on their lives, and James's own journey of self-reflection and remorse. As the tension in the studio reached a fever pitch, Samantha posed the question on everyone's minds. "Mr. Whittaker, you've proposed a radical transformation of La Rosa Blanca. Can you tell us more about your plans?" James leaned forward, his eyes alight with a mixture of determination and hope. "La Rosa Blanca will be completely overhauled. We're changing everything, from our hiring practices to our menu, to the very culture of the restaurant. We want to create a space that celebrates diversity, that actively works to combat discrimination." He turned to the Gonzalez family. "And I'm hoping that Carmen and Jose will be part of this transformation. Their story, their experience, could be instrumental in helping us create real, lasting change." The studio fell silent as all eyes turned to the Gonzalez family. This was the moment of truth, the decision they had wrestled with for weeks. Carmen spoke first, her voice steady. "We've thought long and hard about this offer. At first, the idea of working with the very people who hurt us seemed impossible." Jose nodded, continuing, "But we realized that this isn't just about us anymore. It's about all the families who've faced discrimination, all the people who've been made to feel less than because of their race or ethnicity." Carmen squeezed Jose's hand. "So yes, we've decided to accept Mr. Whittaker's offer. Not because we've forgotten or forgiven what happened, but because we believe this is an opportunity to create real change." The studio erupted in applause, but Samantha wasn't finished. "Mr. Whitaker, are you prepared for the backlash this decision might bring? There are many who might see this as too little, too late." James nodded solemnly. "I am. I know that words and promises aren't enough. That's why I'm putting everything on the line. My reputation, my business, everything. We're going to document this entire process, warts and all, to show that real change is possible." As the interview wound down, Samantha turned to the camera. "There you have it, America. A story that began with a viral video of discrimination has led to this unprecedented moment. Will this collaboration between the Gonzalez family and La Rosa Blanca lead to genuine change? Or is it too optimistic to believe that deeply ingrained prejudices can be overcome?" The lights in the studio dimmed, but for the Gonzalez family and James Whitaker, the real work was just beginning. They left the stage, not as adversaries, but as unlikely allies in a fight against discrimination that would challenge them in ways they had never imagined. As they stepped out of the studio and into the cool night air, they knew that their journey was far from over. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with skepticism, backlash, and countless obstacles. But for the first time since that fateful night at La Rosa Blanca, there was a glimmer of hope. A belief that perhaps, just perhaps, their pain could be transformed into a force for positive change. The story that had begun with a family being kicked out of a restaurant was now poised to become a catalyst for a much larger movement, one that would challenge deeply held beliefs and spark conversations in homes and businesses across the nation. 6 months had passed since the explosive interview on America Tonight. The warm California sun beat down on the freshly painted facade of La Rosa Blanca as a crowd gathered for its grand reopening. The restaurant, once a symbol of discrimination, was about to unveil its transformation. Carmen and Jose Gonzalez stood side by side with James Whitaker, their faces a mixture of anticipation and lingering apprehension. The journey to this moment had been far from easy. In the months following their televised agreement, they had faced intense scrutiny from all sides. Some praised their courage and willingness to work towards change, while others accused them of selling out or falling for a publicity stunt. The Gonzalez family had received both support and threats, forcing them to navigate a new reality of heightened public attention. For James, the backlash had been severe. Many of his former high-end clientele abandoned the restaurant, viewing his confession and subsequent actions as a betrayal. He had faced financial struggles, death threats, and the challenge of completely overhauling a business model built on exclusion. But today, as they prepared to cut the ribbon on the new La Rosa Blanca, there was a palpable sense of hope in the air. Jose stepped forward to address the crowd, his voice strong despite the emotion evident in his eyes. 6 months ago, our family experienced something no one should ever have to go through. We were humiliated, discriminated against, and made to feel like we didn't belong. He paused, looking at his family. Sofia and Diego stood tall, their faces reflecting a new maturity born from their experiences. Miguel, now 9, clung to Carmen's hand, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. "But today," Jose continued, "we're not here to dwell on the past. We're here to celebrate a new beginning. La Rosa Blanca is no longer just a restaurant. It's a symbol of what can happen when we confront our biases, admit our mistakes, and work together towards change." Carmen stepped forward, her voice steady. "This journey hasn't been easy. There were times when we questioned whether we were doing the right thing. But every time we received a message from someone who had faced similar discrimination, every time we saw a spark of understanding in someone's eyes, we knew we had to keep going." James Whitaker, looking both humbled and determined, spoke next. "I stand before you today not as the man I was, but as the man I'm striving to become. La Rosa Blanca's transformation is more than just a change in decor or menu. It's a commitment to actively combat discrimination in all its forms." He outlined the changes they had implemented: a diverse hiring policy that prioritized inclusivity, a menu that celebrated cuisines from various cultures, and a portion of profits dedicated to organizations fighting racial discrimination. Most importantly, they had instituted a rigorous training program for all staff, focusing on cultural sensitivity and bias recognition. As the ribbon was cut and the doors opened, The crowd surged forward, eager to see the changes for themselves. The interior of La Rosa Blanca had been completely redesigned. Gone were the stuffy, exclusive trappings of before. In their place was a warm, vibrant space filled with art, from local minority artists and photographs documenting the journey of transformation. The Gonzalez family made their way inside, memories of that fateful night 6 months ago flashing through their minds. But as they were greeted warmly by the diverse staff and seated at a table of honor, those painful memories began to fade, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and hope. As the evening progressed, Carmen noticed Miguel deep in conversation with a young African-American boy at a nearby table. The two were laughing and sharing stories, oblivious to the differences that might have once kept them apart. Tears welled up in Carmen's eyes as she nudged Jose. "Look," she whispered, nodding towards Miguel. "This is why we did it. For him. For all the children who deserve to grow up in a world where they're judged by their character, not their color." Jose squeezed her hand, his own eyes glistening. "We've still got a long way to go," he said softly. "But this is a start." As the night wore on, the new La Rosa Blanca buzzed with energy. People from all walks of life sat side by side, sharing meals and stories. The air was filled with a mixture of languages and laughter, a testament to the diversity the restaurant now celebrated. James made his way to the Gonzalez family's table, a look of genuine gratitude on his face. "I can never thank you enough," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You had every right to walk away, to demand retribution. Instead, you chose to be part of the solution. You've taught me more about courage and integrity than I ever thought possible." As they raised their glasses in a toast, the Gonzalez family felt a weight lifting from their shoulders. The pain of that night would never fully disappear, but it had been transformed into something powerful, something hopeful. Outside, as the sun set over Los Angeles, a line was forming at La Rosa Blanca's doors. Word had spread quickly about the restaurant's transformation, and people were eager to be part of this new chapter. The story of a Latino family kicked out of a restaurant for talking loudly had become so much more. It had exposed deep-seated racism, challenged a community to confront its biases, and ultimately sparked a transformation that reached far beyond the walls of one restaurant. As Carmen tucked Miguel into bed that night, he looked up at her with wise eyes beyond his years. "Mama," he said softly, "I'm proud of us. We made a difference, didn't we?" Carmen kissed his forehead, her heart full. "Yes, mijo, we did, and we'll keep making a difference one day at a time." As she turned out the light, Carmen realized that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But tonight, in this moment, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what they had accomplished. A family's pain had been transformed into a catalyst for change. A viral video had exposed racism and led to a business's transformation. And in the process, countless lives had been touched, conversations started, and minds opened. It wasn't a happily ever after ending. Real life rarely provides those. But it was a beginning, a step towards a more inclusive, understanding world. And for the Gonzalez family, that was enough. They had turned their moment of humiliation into a movement of hope, and in doing so, had written a new chapter not just for themselves, but for their community and beyond.
Thank you very much for listening to this story. Comment below what you thought of the ending and from which city you're listening to us. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, click on the next story that's appearing on your screen now. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories together. See you soon.